The 4Ps, or the Pantawid Pamilya Pilipino program, is defined as giving money to poor people in return for fulfilling specific behavioral conditions with the primary objective of alleviating poverty. These conditions include children's school attendance, up-to-date vaccinations, or regular visits to a healthcare facility by pregnant women.
Ang layuning palawakin ang saklaw ng Pantawid Pamilya Pilipino Program natupad. Ang dinatnan nating mahigit 700,000 kabahayang benepisyaryo ng programa noong 2010, umabot na sa halos 4 na milyon na kabahayan sa ating pong administrasyon.
Part of CCT's expansion plan, DSWD proposed a dramatic increase in its budget from the 56.15 billion pesos this year to 88 billion pesos in 2014. The government sees this as an investment in human capital, but critics of 4P said that these doleouts did not make a dent on poverty incidents. Welcome to Opposing Views, a hard, straightforward discussion of today's most pressing issues. In the recent APEC summit held in Indonesia, President Benigno Aquino III hailed the administration's Cct Program as a major strategy for achieving inclusive growth. But Commission on Audit report on the Department of Social Welfare and Development for 2012 found billions of pesos worth of problems in the 4Ps program, such as unliquidated disbursements, The 4Ps, or the Pantawid Pamilya Pilipino program, is defined as giving money to poor people in return for fulfilling specific behavioral conditions with the primary objective of alleviating poverty. These conditions include children's school attendance, up-to-date vaccinations, or regular visits to a healthcare facility by pregnant women.
Ang layuning palawakin ang saklaw ng Pantawid Pamilya Pilipino Program natupad. Ang dinatnan nating mahigit 700,000 kabahayang benepisyaryo ng programa noong 2010, umabot na sa halos 4 na milyon na kabahayan sa ating pong administrasyon.
Part of CCT's expansion plan, DSWD proposed a dramatic increase in its budget from the 56.15 billion pesos this year to 88 billion pesos in 2014. The government sees this as an investment in human capital, but critics of 4P said that these doleouts did not make a dent on poverty incidents. Welcome to Opposing Views, a hard, straightforward discussion of today's most pressing issues. In the recent APEC summit held in Indonesia, President Benigno Aquino III hailed the administration's Cct Program as a major strategy for achieving inclusive growth. But Commission on Audit report on the Department of Social Welfare and Development for 2012 found billions of pesos worth of problems in the 4Ps program, such as unliquidated disbursements, grants released to non-beneficiaries, and grants released in violation of established guidelines, among others. So we ask tonight, does the Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino program, or 4Ps, effectively support the poorest Filipinos to alleviate poverty? Good evening, I'm Rod Nepomuceno, and this is Opposing Views. And with us tonight is the National Deputy Project Manager of 4Ps, Wadel Cabrera. Wadel, good evening.
Yes, good evening, Rod, and good evening to all our televiewers.
What are your quick thoughts on this?
We are of the firm belief that Pantawid Pamilya, as a human development program that invests in the health and education of poor families, by ensuring their health and education, is on track to achieving the objectives it was designed for.
All right. And also joining us in our discussion tonight is the Executive Director of Ibon Foundation, Sani Africa. Sani, good evening.
Good evening, Rod.
Yep. Sani, can you give us your quick thesis on the CCT program?
Well, our problem with the CCT is that the government declares it as the cornerstone of its strategy to fight poverty. We have no doubt, we agree completely with the DSWD. The poorest families need all the income support they can get. The problem is that The Cct program is a short-term program. It's giving families a short-term income subsidy. But at the same time, the government is not doing anything to actually resolve the problem of long-standing and historic joblessness.
Let's start off with the amount, no? Because the DSWD gives out, at least under this program, a maximum of 1,400 pesos per family. Is this amount enough?
A family with a maximum of 3 children enrolled in the program would receive a maximum of 1,400 a month. No? 500 for the health grant, and then 300 pesos for each child that's being monitored for education compliance. According to comparative studies that the government has done, and even the SWD, this amount of grant is roughly about 20% of the income that a poor family would require in order to be able to meet their daily requirements. Proxy means test is the methodology that's being used in order to determine if a household actually falls within or under or above the poverty threshold.
Now, Sunny, 1,400 is that enough, or we shouldn't even be talking about amounts here?
It's not going to be enough. It's not a question of figures. The poorest families, you have each person living on 20, 30, 40 pesos per person per day. So the 1,400 pesos, without a doubt, that's going to be a big help where they're coming from, but it's still not going to be enough to lift them from poverty, even on a daily or monthly basis. That's unambiguous. The CCT has been implemented since 2007, the pilot testing. It's been implemented more or less full scale since 2009, 2010, where they've been increasing the budgets to tens of billions of pesos. But in the latest poverty report of the government, the FIES, released in 2012, there was actually no change in poverty incidence as recorded between 2009 and 2012.
Well, that's true, actually, that you cannot expect 1,400 pesos to totally lift the family out of the poverty line. But you have to look at the program and its investment in terms of its long-term effects. You have to understand that 1,400 for the poorest of the poor, as you have said, is actually really significant for them to be able to provide for the education needs of their children, at the same time for them to also ensure that they have their basic nutritional requirements. By ensuring that these children, by incentivizing their health-seeking behavior and their education-seeking behavior, you are investing in their future. You are ensuring that the children of today from among the poor households are able to get education, they're able to get immunization, and also pregnant mothers.
So you're just making sure that these aspects are covered so that they don't have to worry about that and they can worry about everything else.
Yes,
is that
and then of course you have to understand that for the longest time these poor households have actually been deprived of these basic services.
Now, Sunny,
I think there's just two little problems with that argument. First is the incentivization. Basically, what the CCT program does is it gives an incentive for the mothers, especially, to have their children immunized, for them to do their checkups and all of that. So our little problem with the incentivization is basically if we're going to be spending 300 to 350 billion pesos to make it attractive for these mothers to bring their children to health centers or for them to be checked, have their own checkups, we're wondering, is that the best way to actually motivate a mother or a parent to bring their children to the health center? We were thinking the more fundamental thing to do is not essentially to bribe them or incentivize them to bring their children to a health facility where they should be going, but actually educate them, and that's more sustainable because the problem is that the logic of the CCTs, it treats as a problem of the lack of health and education for the children, we think in the wrong manner, through incentivization. Why not spend the 350 billion pesos over the CCT program to actually expand rural health units, to expand barangay health centers, to expand even tertiary hospitals, and to expand public schools? The argument is it's an investment in the children for them to be healthier and more educated so that when they grow older, they can get jobs. Yeah. The fatal flaw is that the CCT program is occurring in a context where the government is not implementing policies to create jobs. So for instance, one major claim of the CCT...
It's a dole-out.
It's not just the problem the dole-out, it's that there's a flaw in the argument that if you educate children, they'll have a better future. Why? As it is right now, the CCTs be extended to high school, but as it is, 3 out of 5 unemployed Filipinos have high school degree at the very least. 1 out of 5 have a college degree. If at the end of their education, there's still no jobs in the job market because jobs have not been generated because you're implementing poor economic policies, the CCT program will actually have gone to naught.
I wanted to make 3 points. Number one, the whole process actually is a rights-based approach to what the poor households require. No? You have to understand that these families come from a long historical experience of deprivation. They don't know what their rights are. They don't know that it is the state's responsibility to educate their children and to provide for their health needs. This might sound anecdotal, but I'd like to tell you about a woman who comes from the poorest barangay in the poorest municipality according to the last census in Siayan, Zamboanga del Norte. Because of the program, and she's been enrolled in the program for 2 years now, it was precisely because of Pantawid that it's for the first time, her family is able to access government services. In this community in Siayan, it's the mothers themselves that give birth to their children. Because of the program and because they are required to actually go to health centers and give birth attended to by a trained health professional, they've encountered midwives. They know the immunization that their children are required to receive. Right. So it is basically a recognition of that right, and that's why those services and facilities are being provided for. Yeah. The second thing I'd like to correct also is the impression that the program is a dole-out program. It's not. No? The basic notion of what dole out is you give from out of the goodness of your heart. It's your charitable heart that provides for what another person requires. But the program acts precisely because of the conditions, and there are a lot of conditions that have to be met in order for the households to receive their grants. For the 500 peso grant alone, there are several health conditions. They have to, pregnant women have to go to the health centers, eventually give birth in the health center, have their children immunized, have their children monitored for their weight on a monthly basis, and then also attend the monthly family development sessions where they are made aware of their rights and responsibilities as citizens. The third point I'd like to address is on the issue of job creation. Poverty alleviation and even the creation of jobs and long-term productivity and sustainability of the gains of the CCT does not end and begin with CCT. It's the whole machinery of government, and it is precisely because of this recognition that the buzzword is now convergence. We begin with targeted beneficiaries in the CCT, and all other programs and services of DSWD and the rest of government are poured in, targeted to these beneficiaries.
I have to ask though. Do you think the 4 Ps though is being implemented and monitored properly? Because you had mentioned that you have certain conditions. Do you think, and I'll throw the question to Sunny if what he thinks about
we believe so. There are a lot of mechanisms that are in place. I'd like to mention 3. Number 1, we have the internal monitoring system that the program employs. In fact, the compliance verification system is automated. It's integrated such that no household can actually receive their grants if they are not monitored for compliance. And it's automated. The whole system is run via a computerized system. There are internal control mechanisms in place. We do our own internal spot checks. There's an external spot check that's being contracted to third parties. The last is that there's 3-wave impact evaluation that's also being conducted by reputable institutions. The first and second wave has been contracted to the SWS for the data gathering, but this is the design and the conduct is largely influenced and helped out by the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and by Australian Aid.
Sorry to cut you. Sunny, I'll have to give Sunny some time. Sunny, your thoughts on the implementation and the monitoring of the 4 Ps?
Quickly have to stress though, we can't assess the 4 Ps just on its feel-good factor. We have to address the 4 Ps by what the government has said it is. The government says it is the cornerstone in its strategy to fight poverty. So I think we should assess it on that point. In which case, we cannot separate the fact of the government not doing other job-creating measures outside of that. So I think that actually compromises the CCTs. But specifically the CCTs, they're really spending billions of pesos for the whole administration of the program. So we can grant that they're spending those billions of pesos. We can grant that they're in support of the tens of billions of pesos in terms of dolouts. But that's precisely our question. Why do you have to spend the billions of pesos to administer a program where there's actually a marginal gain? For instance, we had a look at the World Bank study. In effect, the Cct program had spent about 120 billion pesos since 2007 to get maybe 3 to 5 percentage point increments in terms of the requirements of having the children immunized, etc. So we're wondering right now, did we actually need to spend 120 billion pesos for these little increments? And again, the question is, we don't have much money in the country. Well, putting aside the pork barrel issue, we have finite resources as a government. Where are those finite resources best spent? And we really are completely convinced it should not be on these kinds of welfare interventions, which I mean, there's a short-term gain for that. But also apart from that, I think the COA report is quite interesting, and I'm actually quite, we welcome the response of the DSWD to the COA findings, because I don't think that it's impossible for so much money to be going around. It's pretty sure there are going to be leakages, either as targeted by the program or with some kind of irregularity. So I think that's something that we should be monitoring. And initially, the COA has made some findings where we're wondering at least there's at least some tens of millions of pesos, possibly over 1.5 billion pesos, where the COA, as an independent agency, doing a check and balance on the DSWD has raised concerns.
All right. Sorry, I'll have to cut you short on that. At this point, we have to take a short break. Let's see first the viewer's opinion through our online poll regarding this topic. Our question, does the Pantawid Pamilya Pilipino program, or 4Ps, effectively support the poorest Filipinos to alleviate poverty? The results, yes, 45%, and no, 55%. Join the discussions online. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/SolarOpposingViews, and follow us also on Twitter at opposing_views. Use the hashtag OpposingViewsCCT. We'll take a short break. More issues about the conditional cash transfer when Opposing Views returns. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. You're still watching Opposing Views. Still with us, National Deputy Project Manager of 4Ps, Wadel Cabrera, and the Executive Director of the Ibon Foundation, Sani Africa. Our question for tonight, does the Pantawid Pamilya Pilipino program, or 4Ps, effectively support the poorest Filipinos to alleviate poverty? Now, let's go, Wadel, I have a question regarding the other programs before. Before, there were programs like, I think they call it the direct cash transfer. How different is the 4Ps from these other poverty alleviation programs of the government in the past? And how much better is it?
The main distinguishing feature of the current CCT is that the identification and targeting of beneficiaries. You have to understand that for the longest time, the NSO and the NSCB tells us the number of poor households, or in relation to the total population, this much number is said to be poor or falling under the poverty line. What the DSWD did was to survey all, for some areas, for example, 100% saturation, to be able to locate and identify those that are considered to be poor households. And then we ran the proxy means test from out of the survey results to determine if the household actually falls within or under the local poverty threshold of the province and of the municipality. And therefore, there's not much room for leakage because the beneficiaries have been properly identified. I mean, you don't develop a program and say you'd have a feeding program for this particular geographic area and then serve everyone there, regardless if there are some households that don't actually require the intervention.
Now, Sani, the Ibon Foundation has been around, and you've seen other poverty alleviation programs. How different is this? Is this a different animal, or is it a better animal?
It's very strange. The most welcome thing about the CCTs, it's a direct and immediate welfare gain for the families, unambiguously. because of the income of maximum 1,400 pesos a month. That's a welfare increase for them. Over the few months being implemented, the health gains and perhaps education gains, they're also immediate gains. But that's actually the worrying thing. The most welcome gain the CCT program gets is diverting from the fact that their poverty in the long run is not being actually resolved. It's just creating the illusion over a 8 to 10 year program of 350 to maybe 400 billion pesos right now, if it's being expanded. It's creating the illusion that you're lifting them out of poverty. At the same time, the government, with its other hand, is actually implementing policies that's actually reducing jobs. So for us, it's a contradiction. The fact that the government has been liberalizing agriculture and has been liberalizing industry, those have caused two things. Philippine industry right now, manufacturing, is as small as it was in the 1950s. It's only 22% of the economy. Philippine agriculture is the smallest it's ever been in its entire history. Job creation is a problem. In the last year, by official figures, 155,000 more unemployed. So there's a long-term problem. The government has destroyed domestic industry, has destroyed domestic agriculture. They're not creating enough jobs. They're forcing almost 5,000 Filipinos abroad every day to find work. At the same time, with the other hand, this is fantastic welfare intervention, giving the illusion of poverty being alleviated.
Do you think this illusion that it's creating, and I'll throw the question also to Adele, do you think that this illusion is making more Filipinos lazy?
Completely, we do not agree. I think that's the most patronizing view. I mean, we've told this to DSWD before. It's so patronizing to think that Filipinos will become lazy because of this. Categorically, we know, give a Filipino a job, they will want to work. You will have
under the CCT, give them 1,400 pesos. Do you think it will make them lazy?
Nope, I don't think so, because their problem is not that they're getting a dole out and not doing anything for it. The problem is they try to get a job, but there are just no jobs to be had.
Okay.
Which is back to our exact same point. We like the welfare intervention. That's fantastic. That's incredible. But it should be a short-term thing. And if the government is not doing its work elsewhere, it's using the CCT and the DSWD and the hundreds and thousands of staff actually implementing it. We think you're actually being used to cover up a faulty economic program.
Do you think that the CCT should be used instead directly to create jobs?
Yeah, I'd like to address or use the term that Sunny used earlier. That's the CCT is the cornerstone. Being the cornerstone program of the government, it is the locus of the convergence of several other programs as well.
In other words, it's not the only stone. It's not the only stone.
Yeah. It provides you a mechanism to be able to strategically target who needs the intervention insofar as jobs creation and providing lifeline to this. But I'd like to correct that kind of impression, because internal to DSWD, the beneficiaries begin their social welfare intervention with us through the CCT. But as the years pass by, or in fact on the first or second year in the program, they're already being transitioned to other social welfare interventions as well.
Such
as the Sustainable Livelihood Program, where there are there are several, over 100,000 beneficiaries already, but we cannot immediately
cover
serve
everyone.
all, precisely because not everyone is entrepreneurial, not everyone has employable
But how do you
skills.
address that, what Sunny mentioned, that the policies of this government are reducing jobs in agriculture and manufacturing, I think you mentioned?
I cannot speak for the rest of government or even for the Department of the Labor and Employment, although they're with us in the National Advisory Committee. We develop program policies and guidelines together with them, with the other agencies of government.
Pero, actually, this convergence thing, ito yung problem minsan eh. The CCT, the 4Ps, is a very elegant program. It's very elegant in terms of the administration, in terms of the design, in terms of the implementation. It's very elegant in terms of how it's packaged. But for instance, the convergence program you just mentioned, you have 4.5 million Filipinos unemployed. You have another almost 8 million underemployed. With your convergence strategy, you're talking about a few 100,000 entrepreneurs. A few 100,000 entrepreneurs in a sea of joblessness is nothing. Second point, again, even the COA found out, a lot of the projects being implemented, they're actually not getting repaid. Why? Because apparently, their suspicion is that the entrepreneurial initiatives aren't actually panning out. And they won't pan out. In the end, the DSWD will never be able to create 4.3 million entrepreneurs if the wider economy is not being resolved. And it's actually quite sad because you have these really, honestly, heroic efforts by DSWD, but they're like running in place. And it's crazy. They're spending, 18 hours days, long trips, going into the field to try to do these interventions. But it's a welfare intervention, which is...
It's a drop in the bucket, you're saying.
A drop in the bucket, and it's running in place. It's not, in the long run, it's not actually getting anywhere.
I want to delve in another issue naman, or I guess angle in this CCT. No? Now, some people are arguing, some sectors are arguing that 4P is being used as a political instrument at the local level, especially. And in fact, there's some sectors were saying that because you're now serving the poor as the poor, which is the target market of, let's say, the communists and the leftists, you're being able to sway them away from the left wing, so to speak. What is your take on that?
First, well, I think based on anecdotal reports that we've been receiving from the field, people who have been disenfranchised, or who have not accessed government services for the longest time are able to see the face of government. In fact, the common story that we're hearing is that for most of these families, it's their first time to actually see government face-to-face and avail of these services. And probably we're intruding into the work of some and preventing them from further firing up feelings of disenfranchisement and all those negative feelings that they have towards government. But the other thing that I wanted to say was that we also work with a lot of organizations that are on the ground. Now, we have, on aggregate, we have over 300 partners from civil society organizations that actually help us monitor program implementation. They also provide services to our beneficiaries, and they are able to give us feedback as to how the program is actually being implemented on the ground.
All right. Sunny, your thoughts on that?
Well, other anecdotes. We also have anecdotes from the field where in the course of the family development sessions, beneficiaries are being discouraged from joining farmers' organizations because they're with the left, because they're going to be subject to militarization. We've heard that from Panay Island, from Northern Mindanao, from South Mindanao, from Surigao, from Agusan, Compostela Valley, from Iloilo. For us, that's worrying because if inadvertently the family development sessions are being used as a mechanism for propaganda by the government, that's a problem because it goes against the rights-based approach of actually giving them the choice. And again, we have anecdotes. There are anecdotes. It's a huge program. There was going to be anecdotes, but I think portraying the Cct program as a well-meaning program, we can grant that. But how it's actually implemented on the ground, there's just so many problems.
All right. Well, Waddell, one quick
I wanted to address
message,
also the issue of politicking because there are several political forces on the ground. We also have to contend with local politicians, barangay captains, mayors, and the like. If you remember, early this year, we launched what we call the Bawal and Epal campaign, and it's actually ongoing right now in light of the barangay elections. The message being is that no other entity, apart from the DSWD, has the right and obligation to enlist and also remove beneficiaries from the program. So while they are our partners in providing services,
you try to avoid the politicking part.
They don't have anything to do with the identification, the registration, and even the delisting of beneficiaries.
Okay, I'm sorry to cut you short, Waddell and Sunny. Unfortunately, believe it or not, we've run out of time, but we should really have a part 2 of this. But thank you very much. We'd like to thank our guests, Mr. Waddell Cabrera and Sunny Africa, for being with us tonight. Now, there are reasons why we should support the conditional cash transfer scheme of the government called 4Ps. Now, we need to invest in human capital, truly care for the health and welfare of the less fortunate. And also policies like 4Ps is a walk the talk type of program of the government. But no matter how noble the intentions are, if there is no transparency, there will be no success in any policy. There's still a lot of explaining to do as to where the billions of pesos mentioned in the Audit Commission report went. Now, the huge amount of money that should have been received by the poorest families nationwide, we should find out more about this. Let us not be another PDAF and DAP issue in the making. Now, let's take a final look on our online poll. Our question is, does the Pantawid Pamilya Pilipino Program, or 4Ps, effectively support the poorest Filipinos to alleviate poverty? The accumulated votes from all our online platforms, the results, yes, 55.5%, and no, 44.5%. And that's our opposing views for tonight. Tune in again next week for another bold and engaging discussion on the most relevant issues of today. I'm Rod Nepomuceno. Good night and God bless.